Thank you, Mark. Tánaiste, guests. Mark actually reminded me of the failed digital that I was a part of for 20 years. There are about 1,000 people working for HP in Galway now in software, and they were all the digital people that moved to Compaq and then to HP. So in so many ways, it's not about the brand or the company, it's about what the people do with their skills in any of the walks of life that they pursue post getting the training, the development, the expertise. Digital gave an awful lot to this country, and you can see, as Mark said, so many people that I meet today that are working, running their own businesses, indigenous businesses, doing very, very well. Came out of multinationals, just not so much the multinationals themselves, but just the international experience, the experience of getting a chance to do something on a broader stage and then using that later. So whether the multinationals stay forever or not, or they morph into something new, I think that the main thing from an Ireland perspective is that when they're here, we try and utilize them as best we can for the long-term future of the country. And one of the ways to do that is to help create a system where good people become better, and then those people go out and do bigger things for the economy. I was here in 2007, and I was speaking about the stalled productivity in the public service institutions, lack of benchmarking in terms of the public service versus the, if you like, the private sector, our loss of competitiveness, stalled export growth, and so on. And I'm looking back on those now as the good old days. A friend of mine used to talk about the good old days, and then he used to say, formerly known as these trying times. So, you know, let me just give you a little bit of my own personal experience. This is my 40th year working. I started off in a company called Brunswick making bowling alleys. Many of you older people in the audience might remember those. They were back in the late 60s, early 70s. And they had about 500 people working for them, and they exported bowling lanes, installations, 200 lane installations, and they plastered the whole of Japan with these bowling lanes. And that's what we did. That was the first multinational I worked for. And after a small stint on my own in a small company, I went and joined Digital in Galway at the time, and then I helped to start that up, and then went to Clonmel and to the States. And had a long, very good career with Digital, and then moved on in 91, 92, I think it was, to Intel. I was working in the States, and I came home to my wife one night, and I said, guess what, honey? We have a great choice with Digital. They want to either send us to Canada, Hong Kong, or Australia. I said, which would you prefer? She said, any one of those sounds okay to me. And I said, that's terrific. She said, well, I'm going home. You can pick any one you want. So Intel at the time were looking for good, I won't say young people, good, bright people, and I got the job working for them. So the rest, as they say, is history. The experience I've had with multinationals, Digital and Intel, and I think we owe a debt of gratitude to many, many Irish managers in these systems, because the one thing that I've found about the Irish management system, if you like, in the context of how they do their jobs in multinationals, the Irish guys have a great natural inclination, almost in their DNA, to take whatever the corporate mandate is and then just expand it. Whereas if you go around the world and speak to heads of multinationals, particularly in their own country, say in America, they don't have any such aspiration. Their basic role is to do what the company asks them to do. So there's a DNA, I think it's the fact that we're on an island, off an island somewhere, and we have this great sense of whatever we've got, let's double it. So there's a great sense in the people that work in multinationals of taking whatever the mandate is and expanding it. And Intel is no exception, and I've been doing this for many years. Let me tell you a little bit of a story about Intel and what we do. It's truly a magnificent organization. I don't just say that because I'm involved, but it really is. It's working in a business field that is the leading edge technology on the planet. It's dealing in nanoscience, nano devices, nanostructures that have fundamentally changed the way the world works. And the people out there are literally working in a system that literally has architected the way the world works and changing the way the world works. Whether you think about communications, health, education, social systems, no matter what you're talking about, in this digital age, companies like Intel make products that allows the world to change, and our people in Ireland are doing that and doing it very well. The second thing about companies like Intel is they compete with each other around the world. So the natural, again, DNA is to figure out who the best is in the world at whatever it is and just go beat the pants off them. So there's no fear of seeking out who the best is, facing up to that best, whether it's safety, quality, output, cost, innovation, whatever it is. So the culture and the system is geared up to figuring out who the best is in the world and taking that on. The other thing we do as we're prosecuting the actual mandate of the company, build a $3 billion fab, do it in 3 years, and produce products that are as good as any other part of Intel is doing, people who've been doing this 20, 30 years. And that's the challenge. So you go about doing that, and then everybody figures out, okay, so what can we add to that? So let's do, maybe we can do some research and development. Maybe we can expand our Shannon facility. Maybe we can use some of the IT capabilities we have to do some really interesting stuff in emerging digital health, which we're doing. Stuff also in the nano devices I spoke about earlier. There's a collaboration going on between ourselves, Trinity College and others around, it's a Centre for Research in Advanced Nanoscience, nanostructures going on down in TCD. Very, very high potential, small environment supported by SFI, wonderful organization by the way, and has great opportunity to expand into something which has a unique capability done out of Ireland by Irish people, working in partnership with other people from around the world, but to create some unique value. I mentioned about the digital health environment. If you ever want to look in a place that has massive potential for unique competencies that can be developed and sold around the world, and if you ever want to think about billions of dollars of a business, digital health is it. The world is getting older and living longer, and people are going to require much more efficient systems to support them. The health systems, whether it's in America or any developed country in the world, are basically collapsing because of the way those systems work and the costs of those systems. Helping people to go through their lives by supporting them with digital infrastructure, whether it be home or on the move or whatever. It's mind-boggling the amount of applications and support systems that can be there for those kind of people. So what we've been doing in Intel for the last 20 years is doing what the company asks us to do, which is to make the best widgets in the world and make them at a high quality, low cost and so on. And then we go about working on what other things can we do in and around that core capability, if you like, the anchor tenant, so that we can expand it. And we've been very successful in lots of areas there. So I was asked to come and speak a little bit about the smart economy, and my first reaction to that was, oh my God, I've been working for 40 years in the stupid economy. And so I better start learning about what this smart economy is all about. And you know, I'm not quite sure yet. I think different people have different versions of it. But in essence, I think it's all about recognizing that we have to create new value in our Irish economy so that that value can attract high incomes so that we can live healthy, productive, good lives. And to me, that's kind of what the smart economy is. So it's, in some ways, it's broader than the actual economy piece, because it's basically a smart ecosystem or a knowledge society, you call it what you want. The notion that we can exclusively compete in producing either products or services that are essentially a commodity, I'm sure has been dispelled in recent times. So therefore, we don't have any choice other than create value propositions that are quote-unquote up that value chain, that we can uniquely get rewarded for those, so that we can create an economy that thrives. So I guess that's what we're talking about when we talk about the knowledge economy, or the smart economy. So rather than spend too much time talking about what it would look like, I'll talk about the four things that I think are necessary but not necessarily sufficient. They have to be in place, and they have to be in place, and each one of them has to be exquisitely good. Exquisitely good. And if you can get those four things right and make them exquisitely good, I think you've got the foundations for creating this smart economy. The four basically are an education system that's world-class, and particularly world-class in science, technology, engineering and maths. The 21st century digital economy, smart economy, knowledge economy, whatever way you want to describe it, is going to be underpinned and characterized by an education system that's best in the world. And if we fail to deliver that, then that's one of the foundation pillars that will not be there, and therefore not allow you to even get off the starting blocks in terms of a smart economy. The other one is creating a research and development, I want to call it a sort of a pipeline, and it's a continuous pipeline, and it has a whole bunch of attributes which I don't have time to explain here tonight, but just picture a system whereby from the education system there's a seamless stream of people going into a highly collaborative, very efficient R&D networks. And these networks would be collaborations between universities, large multinationals, and small indigenous companies. And if you can picture a situation where there's segments of that pipeline are working on foundational research, and then applied research, and then commercialization of that research, and working seamlessly in that system, and where they have a measurement system that's basically weeding and feeding that, making it more efficient every day, making hard choices between winners and losers in terms of the areas it focuses on, but making that system stronger every day, every week, every month. So that when you go down a few years, you'll say our research and development total infrastructure is better than it was a year ago, and it's much better than it was 5 years ago. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about when I talk about the R&D ecosystem. The other thing that I think is fundamental to it is a digital infrastructure. I can't conceive of a situation where we are in any way successful in smart economy if we don't have a 21st century digital infrastructure. Picture a scenario. It's both an opportunity and a threat. Ireland is a small, geographically isolated location, and we have the bad fortune, if you like, of having to compete on the world stage. And that combination is a very, very difficult combination. The physical aspects of just distance and also time make it very, very difficult proposition. But the digital the infrastructure that you can put in place eliminates that as a barrier. Picture the people working doing silicon design down in Barna. I know people doing this. And what they rely on fundamentally is transferring big files. And the only way they can do that is through broadband, high-speed broadband, etc., big systems. And the only way they can compete is if it's inexpensive and it's a very, very wide pipe. So to the extent that that is either eliminated as a disadvantage for them or actually created as an advantage for them, then you can have many, many hundreds of people working in remote locations around Ireland, working on a world stage, doing breakthrough research and delivering breakthrough products. And geography and time is no impediment to them. The only way that will happen is if you have a 21st century digital infrastructure. Pro-business government policies underpin all those things. Think about smart kids, think about smart ideas, think about smart government. Those things are necessary as a supporting environment. So if government can organise itself such that it seamlessly supports, without chasms between these areas and without huge overlaps, then it could create an efficient system whereby it's supporting the output that they're looking for from the education system, from the R&D system, and from the digital infrastructure. I've spent a fair bit of time working with government over the years, and I have to say, since I came back to Ireland back in '91, you know, the system that we have in place, the IDA, government support, government policies and so on, has been very, very business friendly. It's actually one of the pleasures of being able to do business in Ireland, whereby you can work with multinationals, you can come back, you can talk about stuff, and you can actually get things done and changed. In fact, one of the unheralded advantages of working and living in a country like Ireland is that we can be small, fast and nimble. And I don't mean those as sort of just, you know, ideas that are sort of esoteric. I mean these as being truly competitive advantages. If you can change, for example, take the digital health area that I spoke about earlier. One of the reasons why I think it has a unique advantage here in Ireland is because the systems that support that kind of an environment where you have access to populations of people that you can do research in to predict trends and so on, Ireland is a very good place to do that because of historical factors, because of the geography makeup of the people and so on. So there's some very specific advantages that we have here in Ireland that you couldn't do this stuff, for example, in the UK or even in the States. So we have some particular advantages because we're small. The other thing I've noticed over the years is working with the universities and working with some of the bodies like Science Foundation Ireland. They are changing. And even in those university systems, the heads of those university systems recognise that they have to change. Now, for my money, it's much too slow and ponderous and so on and so forth, but it would be. But they do recognise that there's a need to bring some of the traditional ways of doing things, the traditional measurement systems, the traditional ways of rewarding results, and change those. I'll give you one simple example. When we do these collaborations in some of the CSETs, for example, Centres for Science, Engineering, Technology, or even the smaller ones, competency centres, what's particular about all of these systems, and I think again is something that Ireland is particularly good at, is they involve a high level of collaboration. Collaboration between a university system, a multinational, a small enterprise, and so on. And we have been particularly good at doing those collaborations in small ways. The problem we face is we have to create a system for doing that, and we have to make it much larger, much more identifiable, and actually turn it into a competitive advantage. I don't think that exclusively multinationals are going to be, if you like, the bedrock of this economy forever, nor are a particular segment of indigenous people that come up and create a new Google and so on. I think the competitive advantage of this country is the ability to uniquely figure out how to work in collaboration with these various institutions and do it in such a way that creates a competitive advantage beyond that which large systems can deliver. The other thing, it doesn't strike you when you think about, you know, education system, R&D systems, digital infrastructure, and pro-business government. I was struck by the power and the ability of Irish people to network. And I don't mean digitally network, I actually mean physically network. I've been around the world doing business for many, many years, and one of the unique capabilities that Irish people have is to be able to put in the hard hours, the long hours networking. They're naturally capable of doing that. They're great communicators. And we've built up very strong, if you like, attitudes towards us from around the world. America, East Coast, West Coast, Asia, and so on. people naturally think of Ireland as a place that, you know, if you talk to the Chinese, you know, they'll have a much better response to if you say to them, let's set up your hub for entry into Europe, where we can facilitate, we can give you a turnkey system to come into Ireland, set up your European headquarters here so that you can expand and develop your brands in Europe. They'd warm to that idea much more than if you were British, for example, or if you were French, and so on. That's just a historical perspective that is an advantage for us that we haven't really mined, in my opinion. We've done it as individuals, but we don't have a collective strategy to do that. A couple of points about not just the networking ability, but I think such huge and fragile importance, I suppose, the attitudes towards the rest of the world to us. I think, you know, I'm so aware of that, and I'm so aware of when something's going on in Ireland, I always imagine it from the other side of the fence, saying to myself, I wonder what the corporate vice presidents of Ireland would think of that, or of Intel would think about that. Or, for example, the corporate vice presidents of all the multinational companies around the world. What would they think of that particular event or item? And it's kind of scary in some ways, and I'll give you a few examples. I have a lot of friends from and this is not meaning to pick out one just to point at it or make some political case. It's just the reality of the experience I've had. I would say there's 15 or 20 executives from the east coast of Boston that when I speak to them about what's going on in Ireland and their attitudes and so on and so forth, and I ask them, what's going on in the States relative to Ireland? And the amount of those people that have mentioned, can you remember the time where someone got a hatchet or a hammer or something like that to an airline down in Shannon? I can vaguely remember it, but it happened at one individual or whatever it was with some political axe to grind, or hammer to grind, whatever it was. That came up in probably 2/3 of the conversations. Now, the point that I'm not making a point of whether that person should or shouldn't protest. The point I'm making is that if we're dealing on a world stage, and part of the collateral we have is the attitudes of trading partners around the world to us, then it's important that we keep an eye on all of that whenever we're doing anything as responsible citizens. And the other one I want to make, and this is the last, if you like, political comment, it's the EU and Lisbon. Again, I'll just say this from my perspective as a citizen in the country, but also as a leader of a multinational. As a citizen, I was appalled and sort of ashamed in some ways of the fact that I personally did very little last time around, because I, like probably many other people, thought that it was a slam dunk, it was going to be a yes. Sure, I thought it was just so obvious that we'd vote yes, and I was wrong. So I've promised myself that I get personally much more involved this time around, because I think I have a voice, like everyone in the audience has a voice, but I think I have a particular perspective that can inform from the perspective of multinationals. And having spent 40 years working with these folks, I have a reasonable idea as to how they think and how they operate. And I can tell you one of the things that is on the list of important things for any investor in Ireland, and that's certainty. They want certainty. If any company is spending 3 billion or 5 billion for a 20-year investment anywhere around the world, one of the things they're looking for is certainty. And the very fact that this whole EU debate and explaining to them what's going on and explaining, the whole background to it, there's an old saying, it says, when you're explaining, you're losing. So when you get to explain for half an hour to these guys, tell me why my investment is still as solid as it was previously with this EU thing going on. They don't particularly care about the issue, but they're simply worried about it from the point of view of, is this any bad news for us in the context of our investment? And I can tell you that whole EU, the Lisbon no thing, there's an awful lot of corporate executives around the world watching that carefully next time around, and the only question they're asking themselves is, do Ireland want to be part of Europe? And the reason they're asking that question is one of the reasons why multinationals came to Ireland as a destination, as part of Europe, making the Ireland decision, was their assumption that Ireland equaled being central to the affairs of Europe. And to the extent that we put doubt in their minds, and they value certainty very, very highly, then it's really important for us to address that. Okay, so let me back up a little bit.
Jim, can I ask you just to maybe wrap it up in the last couple of minutes if I could to move on to questions?
Okay, 4 things. If you want a smart economy or a knowledge economy or a knowledge society, you've got to have the best education system in the world. You've got to have an R&D pipeline which works very, very efficiently and is joined up from start all the way through. You've got to have a 21st century digital infrastructure, just like the road structures of the past. And you've got to have a government that creates policies that supports these things in a coordinated fashion. And that's basically it. Thank you very much.